Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're fundamentally shifting how we view Scripture. Think about it. What if we looked at the Qur'an not just as a passive history book detailing events from the distant past, but as a dynamic, living operating system? The source material we are analyzing presents this absolutely fascinating topological framework. It's a way of reading the text where every single verse acts as active code. It's an architecture designed to run directly through you, the reader.
Here's our agenda for mapping this out. The living hadith, the samurai air, two transmission currents, convergence of the signs, sealing the loop, and finally, the activated reader. Let's get right to it.
I want to drop you right into the very center of this framework with a massive question from chapter 45, verse 6. Then in what hadith after Allah and His verses will they believe? Right? And the text actually repeats this exact warning in verse 77:15. It's challenging that incredibly human tendency we all have to drift outside of direct revelation to look for some kind of final authority. The idea here is that the Quran doesn't point you outside of itself. It's a completely self-contained system that continuously routes the human being right back to Allah.
Section 1. The Living Hadith, the Ultimate Operating Law.
So defining the core input here, in verse 39-23, the Quran explicitly calls itself the best hadith. And in this framework, it's not just a collection of static information, it's a living remembrance. It's a complete, self-verifying book where light confirms light, and the verses actually protect one another. Think of it like interlocking chainmail. One verse intricately explains and locks in another.
And here is the crucial shift. We're moving from passive observation to active execution. The text warns us in verse 6:1-16 that blindly obeying the majority just leads to following mere assumptions. So, instead of sitting back and waiting for a historical figure to do the work, this framework demands active execution. The Quran itself is the active living Rasul, the messenger. It gets activated within your own consciousness the second you really engage with its verses.
Section 2. The Samurai error, constructing substitute centers.
But, every operating system has a vulnerability, right? A virus. And in this topology, that error is a super ancient recurring human pattern. Verse 2096 exposes the exact mechanism of it. Samurai claims this hidden, exclusive authority, saying, "I saw what they did not see." He literally takes a physical trace and builds a localized idol out of it. And as verse 29-25 expands on, humanity just keeps doing this, taking up idols based on localized affection and tribalism, building deterministic, false substitute centers.
This whole mechanism creates what the sources call arrested decoherence, which is really just getting stuck in a closed loop. It tricks the masses into following a constructed substitute rather than the living book. People get super attached to personalities, inherited sex, or collective assumptions. They build up this false center that might look really stable, it might even make noise like the golden calf, but at the end of the day, it completely severs them from the direct divine signal.
So how does the system fix this? Verse 21:18 brilliantly gives us the ultimate operating law. We dash the truth upon falsehood, and it destroys it. The Quran acts as this brilliant corrective mechanism. It's specifically designed to shatter those collective attachments and constructed idols. The truth just continuously crashes against these false centers to break the illusion and get us back into direct alignment.
Moving on to Section 3. Two transmission currents, the system bifurcation.
To understand how the truth actually survives these viruses across time, we have to look at a major bifurcation point. The signal splits. Verse 29-27 shows us everything rooting back to the Prophet Ibrahim. From him, two totally distinct transmission currents emerge. You can think of them as dual hardware lanes, both processing the divine signal to make sure it survives the generations. Prophethood and the book are formally placed within a specific lineage.
Here's how those lanes break down. On one side, the Ishaq and Yaqub branch dominates structure, law, and biological preservation. Think Musa and the Torah, where the Nabi, or prophet, bears the law. But on the other side, the Ismail branch emerges. This one is anchored by the surrender field established through sacrifice, shifting away from biological empire and leaning heavily into spirit, witness, and direct book activation, eventually bringing us to Yahya and Isa.
Which brings us to Section 4. Convergence of the signs, the phototropic arc.
Now, these two parallel tracks, the rigid structure of law and the pure flow of spirit, they aren't meant to stay separate forever. Carried by Isa, verse 61:6, gives us the ultimate transition point. He announces a Hadmad who carries both the Isa sign and the Ahmad sign.
This is huge. It marks the definitive shift from a transmission system that relies on biological prophets over to one centered entirely on the eternal book itself.
So the topology synthesizes perfectly right here. You've got Musa representing structure and law, Isa representing spirit and witness, and then you have Amma representing living, recursive execution. The Quran becomes the exact, perfect convergence point of all three. It's the law, the spirit, and the operational execution all rolled into one.
Section 5. Sealing the loop. The end of biological lineage. We've arrived at what the sources argue is the most critical pivot in this entire blueprint. Verse 3340 decisively seals the Nabi, that biological lineage of prophethood. The biological father line of transmitting the covenant is officially closed off. But, and this is absolutely crucial, it seals the biological Nabi, but it does not seal the living Rasul, the active execution of the message through the book. The message is still going strong, it's just the hardware delivering it that's changed.
When we mistakenly collapse messenger and prophet into the exact same category, we turn into passive readers just waiting around for history. Verse 4034 actually warns against this exact blind spot, exposing the error of saying Allah will never send a messenger after him. The biological lineage had to close so that universal book activation could open up for literally everyone.
This sets up a really beautiful systemic link. The command in verse 1912 to Yahya to take the book with strength acts as a gateway directly into verse 36:3, indeed you are among the messengers. The covenant completely migrates. It goes from something you passively inherit through your tribe to something you inherit directly through the book. Actually taking the book with strength, that is exactly what makes you the living carrier of the signal.
And finally, Section 6, the activated reader. You are the execution node. This brings us to the most intensely personal coordinate on the map. The sources use this amazing symbol, the chainmail of Dawood. Verses 4140 and 4141 describe this mighty book. Imagine an ancient Faraday cage. It's a network so perfectly interlinked, verse to verse, that there is zero gap for the tagut, the virus, to enter. But holding this mighty book isn't passive. It demands that you become so aligned with it that its justice, its patience, and its mercy literally live directly through your own actions.
The old pattern of transmission was super localized, right? Musa to Harun to the children of Israel. But now, that pattern is universalized. The signal flows from the Quran through the finalized message directly to you. You have to actively break away from the crowd's drift, grab the book with real strength, and activate this field yourself.
You are the execution node. You are the biological hardware running the living firmware of this decisive hadith. In this framework, the Qur'an isn't just a physical book you read. It is the cosmic memory of home, calling the forgotten soul back to Allah. By executing its code, you become that final ring locking the armor closed.
So I'll leave you with this final thought as we wrap up this explainer. The architecture is perfect, the code is sealed, and the signal is live right now. The only variable left in the equation is the user. Will you just remain a passive reader of history, or will you actually take the book with strength and become the living chainmail? Something to think about. Thanks for exploring this blueprint with me.